I saw my daughter at the Kroger on Elm Street on a Wednesday afternoon, and for a second I thought I was imagining things. She was standing in the checkout line with my grandson on her hip, 3 years old, chewing on the sleeve of his jacket, and she was counting cash, not tapping a card, not using her phone. Counting actual bills carefully, the way you do when you're not sure you have enough. I hadn't seen her count cash since she was 17 and saving up for concert tickets. I almost called out to her right there between the cereal aisle and the registers. But something stopped me. I don't know what exactly. A father's instinct, maybe. The same thing that used to make me slow down the car when I drive past the school. And something just felt off, even when I couldn't say what. I watched her put 2 items back. Then I walked up behind her and said, "Hey, sweetheart." She spun around so fast she nearly dropped my grandson. Her face did something I hadn't seen it do in years. It went through about 4 emotions in less than a second. Surprise, relief, and then something I can only describe as panic she was trying to hide. "Dad." "What are you doing here?" "Grocery shopping," I said. "Same as you." "Here, let me get that." "No, I've got it. Claire." I said her name the way I used to when she was a teenager and trying to tell me everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. "Let me get it." She looked down at the items on the belt. A pack of diapers and a jar of peanut butter. $40-something total. She put her cash back in her wallet and let me pay, and she didn't say a word while we walked out to the parking lot. My grandson, I call him Little Man, started pointing at a pigeon near the cart return and immediately forgot about everything else. 3-year-olds are good that way. "Where's your car?" I asked. She had a car. A good one. I'd helped her and her husband pick it out 2 years ago. A Honda CR-V, practically new, plenty of room for the car seat and the stroller and whatever else you need when you've got a toddler. I'd even helped with the down payment, though I never made a big deal of it. She said, "I took the bus." I looked at her. She was avoiding my eyes, adjusting my grandson's jacket sleeve, pretending to be very focused on something on the horizon. "Claire, I just needed some air, Dad." "You took the bus to Kroger with a 3-year-old to get air." She didn't answer. We stood there in the parking lot with the afternoon sun coming through the clouds in that thin, watery way it does in November in Ohio, and I waited. I've learned over the years that waiting is sometimes the most useful thing a father can do. She finally said, "Nathan has the car." Nathan was her husband. They'd been married for 5 years. I'd walked her down the aisle at St. Inct, Anthony's on a Saturday in June, and I'd cried, which I hadn't expected to do, and her mother, God rest her soul, would have cried too. "He needed it for work," she said. "He has a truck," I said. A pause, a long one. His mom needed a ride. I didn't say anything to that. Not right then. I picked up my grandson when he started to wander toward the parking lot, settled him on my hip, and I said, "Come have dinner with me." She started to say she couldn't. I could see her calculating something. I just didn't know what yet. "Claire, come have dinner with your father." She came. We went to the Italian place on 5th that she's loved since she was in high school. They still have the same checkered tablecloths. My grandson got pasta with butter, which he ate about 4 bites of before deciding that the paper on the table was more interesting, and Claire sat across from me and held her coffee cup with both hands and didn't eat much. I waited until my grandson was occupied with his crayons, and then I said, "Tell me what's going on." "Nothing's going on. You were counting cash at the register, baby. You were putting diapers back." She looked up at me then, and I saw it. That thing I'd been too far away to see in the parking lot. She looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. I recognized it because I'd seen it once before, on her mother's face, in a hard year we'd had when she was sick. It's the look of someone who has been carrying something alone for too long. "It's complicated," she said. "I've got time." She looked down at my grandson. He was drawing what appeared to be a very enthusiastic scribble and narrating it to himself under his breath. Then she told me. It came out slowly at first, and then faster, the way water moves once you've made the first crack in a dam. She'd been trying to hold it together for so long that once she started talking, it all started coming loose at once. It started about 2 years into the marriage. Nathan's mother, I'll call her Diane, had moved to Columbus from Akron after Nathan's father passed. Nathan was an only child. I understood that, the closeness between them. I didn't have any reason at first to think anything of it, but Diane had started coming over. A lot, 3 times a week at first, then almost every day after my grandson was born. Nathan encouraged it. Claire tried to be welcoming, but Diane had opinions about how the baby was fed, how the house was kept, how Claire spent her time. Little comments, delivered with a smile. You know the kind, and Nathan backed his mother up. Every time. Claire said the first time she really understood what she was dealing with was when she tried to go back to work part-time, when my grandson was about 18 months old. She'd worked in hospital billing before he was born. She was good at it. She liked it. They'd offered her a flexible schedule. She brought it up at dinner one night. Nathan said they'd talk about it. They never talked about it. Instead, Diane brought it up the next time she visited, said the baby needed his mother home, said there was no reason for Claire to work when Nathan made enough money, said it so matter-of-factly, like it had already been decided. It had already been decided. That was when Claire started to realize that conversations between her and Nathan had a habit of going through Diane first, or after, or that Nathan's position on things would shift between Tuesday and Thursday, and on Thursday it always happened to line up with whatever his mother thought. She still told herself it was normal. Some families are close. Some men lean on their mothers. She loved Nathan. She wanted the marriage to work. Then came the finances. About 3 years in, Nathan suggested they consolidate everything. One joint account. All income goes in. All bills come out. Makes things simpler. Claire thought that made sense. They were married. That's what you do. What she didn't fully realize until it was done was that her name on the account didn't give her the access she thought it did. Nathan managed the account online. He paid the bills. When Claire needed money, for groceries, for the baby, for anything, she asked Nathan. At first he always said yes. He was generous even. Then he started asking questions. What's that for? Why do you need that much? Did you check with Mom about the cheaper brand? Did you check with Mom? She tried to bring it up once. Said it felt like she didn't have any independence. He said she was overreacting. Said his mother was just trying to help. Said Claire was ungrateful for everything they provided. She apologized. She still can't tell me exactly why, but she apologized. The car came next. Technically it was in both their names, but Nathan had started driving it more, using it to take his mother to appointments, to run her errands. He'd take it on weekends for days at a time. When Claire said she needed it, he'd say she should have mentioned it sooner, or that his mother had a doctor's appointment, or that she could ask a friend for a ride. And then, I'm telling you this part slowly because I need you to understand how quietly it happened. She stopped asking. That's the part that killed me. Not that he'd taken the car. Not that he'd turned the finances into a system where she had to ask permission to buy diapers. The part that killed me was that my daughter, my Claire, who used to argue with me at 16 about every decision I ever made, because she believed so fiercely in her own right to choose, had stopped asking. She'd just adjusted. She'd found workarounds. She'd started budgeting what little cash she had. She'd learned which days Nathan was in a good mood. She'd figured out how to ask for things in ways that were less likely to start a fight. She'd learned to manage him the way you learn to manage a situation you've decided is permanent. I sat with that for a minute. I didn't say anything. I watched my grandson finish his scribble and hold it up for our approval, very seriously, and I said, "That's great, little man," and I meant it, and then I looked at my daughter. "Does he know where you are right now?" She shook her head. "Does he track your phone?" A pause. Then, "He likes to know where I am. For safety." I took a slow breath through my nose. "Claire, has he ever hurt you?" "No," she said. Fast. Definite. "Nothing like that, Dad." "He's not," he said. Fast. Definite. "Nothing like that, Dad. He's not. It's not like that." I believed her. What was happening was a different kind of damage. The kind that doesn't leave marks you can see. The kind that makes a person slowly forget the size of the life they used to have. "Do you want to leave?" I asked. She looked at my grandson. She looked at her coffee cup. She looked at I don't know how, she said. Here's what people who haven't been in that situation don't always understand. Wanting to leave and knowing how to leave are two completely different things. When someone has spent years quietly removing your access to money, your sense of your own judgment, your connections to the people who'd help you, leaving isn't just a decision. It's a logistics problem, and it's a terrifying one when you have a 3-year-old and no independent bank account and a husband who knows your phone's location at all times. I told her I would handle it. She said, "Dad, you can't just." "I'm not going to do anything stupid," I said. "I'm not going to do anything stupid," I said. "I promise. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at me for a long moment, and then she nodded. I drove her home that night, carried my grandson in from the car because he'd fallen asleep in the seat, and I laid him down on the couch while Claire watched me with her arms crossed over her chest like she was holding herself together. Nathan wasn't home. His truck was gone. I didn't ask where. I hugged my daughter at the door, and I said, "I'll call you tomorrow. Don't do anything different. Just act normal." She almost smiled. "Normal," she said, like the word was in a language she was still learning. I drove home and I sat in my kitchen with the lights off for a while. Then I made a list. I spent the next week making quiet inquiries. I wasn't in law enforcement, never had been, but I'd spent 30 years as a commercial property manager in Columbus, and in that business you know people. You know landlords and contractors and city inspectors, and yes, you know lawyers. I called a friend of mine, a family law attorney I'd referred work to more times than I could count. I explained the situation without using names. He listened. He asked a few questions. He told me what I needed to know. In Ohio, marital assets belong to both spouses. If Nathan had been directing money from a joint account in ways that weren't for household expenses, running his mother around, paying for her things, that was something a court would look at. The car, same situation. He also said something that I've thought about every day since. He said the first thing Claire needed, before anything else, was her own money in her own account at a bank Nathan didn't know about. Even a small amount, because the moment a woman in that situation has financial independence, even just a little, the entire dynamic shifts. She stops being a person who has to ask permission and starts being a person with options. I had set up a savings account for Claire years ago. After her mother died, college was paid for. She was working. She didn't need it then. So I just kept adding to it. She knew it existed, vaguely, but I'd never made a thing of it. I was the only other person on the account. I called the bank and I had them issue Claire a new debit card and mail it to my address. When I handed it to her the following Tuesday, she'd stopped by on the pretense of dropping off some of my grandson's outgrown clothes, which she did sometimes anyway. She stared at it, like she didn't know what she was looking at. "That's yours," I said. "It's always been yours." I just held on to it. "How much?" "Enough," I said. "Enough to get an apartment. Enough for a deposit. Enough for a lawyer." She started to cry. Not dramatic, heaving sobs. Just the quiet kind. The kind that comes when you've been keeping it all locked up so long that even a small kindness is enough to spring the lock. I let her cry. I made her tea. I sat across from her at my kitchen table while she got herself back together. Then we talked about the plan. My attorney friend connected her with a colleague who specialized in domestic cases involving financial control, which is what this was, he'd said, clearly and without hedging, and I appreciated that. We weren't calling it something softer. We weren't calling it complicated. We were calling it what it was. Claire met with the attorney twice before she told Nathan she was filing for divorce. In those 2 weeks, she quietly gathered documents, bank statements she had access to, records on the car, her own old pay stubs from her hospital billing job, her son's medical records, everything on my attorney's list. She kept copies at my house. The moment Nathan was served, he called his mother. I know because Claire told me. And I also know because Diane called Claire 20 minutes later in tears, saying the family would fall apart, saying Claire was destroying her son, saying she'd never see her grandson again. That last part was a mistake. Because threatening a mother's access to her child is the kind of thing that goes into an attorney's notes. Claire didn't argue with her. She said, "I hope we can work this out respectfully," and she hung up and she texted me. She called. "I'm okay." I texted back, "I know. You did great. The divorce took 8 months. It wasn't easy, and I won't pretend it was. Nathan had his own attorney, and there were negotiations, and there were days Claire called me late at night sounding exhausted and uncertain. I drove over when she needed me, and I stayed on the phone when I couldn't. My grandson spent several weekends at my house, while Claire dealt with paperwork and hearings, and the particular kind of emotional labor that comes with dismantling a life you thought you were going to keep. But here's what also happened in those 8 months. Claire found a 2-bedroom apartment in Westerville, 15 minutes from my house. She started back at her old job. Her manager had kept in touch, had been sorry to lose her, was glad to have her back. She bought a used Subaru Forester in her name only, and the day she drove it off the lot, she sent me a photo of herself in the driver's seat with my grandson in the back, both of them grinning. The caption just said, "Ours." The settlement gave her primary custody, which the court leaned toward given the documented pattern of financial control and the records we'd kept. Nathan got his visitation schedule. Diane got nothing legally, which is the appropriate amount for a grandmother who uses a grandchild as a threat. What I think about, more than anything, is a conversation Claire and I had about a month after she'd moved into the apartment. She'd made dinner. Nothing fancy. Pasta, the same kind she used to make in college. And my grandson was already asleep in his new room with the dinosaur sheets she'd picked out herself, and we sat on her second-hand couch in her small, clean living room and just talked. She said, "I keep trying to figure out when it started. Like, what was the first day things were actually wrong?" I said I didn't think it worked that way, that these things don't usually start on a particular day. They start in the space between small adjustments, each one reasonable on its own. She was quiet for a minute. Then she said, "I knew, Dad. I think I knew for a long time. I just kept thinking I was being too sensitive. You weren't. I know that now." I looked at her, sitting in her own apartment in a life she'd built back from scratch, not because someone rescued her, but because she was ready and someone was there. And I thought about her mother, about how much she would have wanted to see this. Not the divorce, but this. This specific moment. Her daughter sitting in her own space, in her own life, saying "I know that now," with her chin up and her voice steady. I told her I was proud of her. She said, "I'm proud of me too." That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the attorney calls, not the logistics, not even the moment she was finally free of all of it. The moment I keep coming back to is that sentence, sitting on her second-hand couch on an ordinary Thursday night. "I'm proud of me too." That's what 5 years of being slowly diminished can take from a person. And that's what they can get back when they finally have room to breathe. My grandson started preschool last September. Every Tuesday and Thursday I pick him up. We get ice cream even when it's cold, which Claire says is ridiculous, and which I plan to continue doing indefinitely. He tells me about his friends and his teachers, and once, very seriously, informed me that dinosaurs are not actually gone because birds are dinosaurs, which I chose to simply accept. He's a happy kid, curious, loud at all the right moments. Claire is good. She got a small promotion at work. She's sleeping again. She laughs at things the way she used to, quick and real, not the careful, polite kind she'd had for the last few years. There's still hard days. The transition of custody is stressful. The paperwork never fully ends, and she still has moments, she tells me, where she second-guesses herself, wonders if she gave up too soon or tried hard enough, or if she should have done something differently. I tell her the same thing every time she says that. I say, "You stayed until you understood what you were staying in, and then you left. That's not giving up. That's finally telling the truth." She usually rolls her eyes at me, which is honestly the best sign of all. I'm 61 years old. I spent 30 years managing buildings, and I know better than most that you can't always fix the foundation damage after the fact. Sometimes the best you can do is stop the water from coming in, shore up what's still standing, and help someone figure out where to go from there. I got lucky. I ran into my daughter at a grocery store on a Wednesday, and she was counting cash for a pack of diapers. And I paid attention. A lot of fathers would have taken her word for it. Would have bought the groceries and said nothing and driven home and figured it wasn't their business. Maybe I overstepped. I've thought about that too. But I drove home the night she told me everything, and I sat in my dark kitchen, and I thought about that savings account I'd been adding to for 15 years, and I thought about how the entire point of putting money away for your kids is so that when something goes wrong, they have options. She had options. She just needed someone to remind her they existed. I made one call that set everything in motion. 30 years of knowing the right people, and it came down to one call to a man I'd sent referrals to for a decade, who owed me a favor, who picked up on the second ring. That's it. That's the whole thing. You build the relationships, you pay attention, you show up at the grocery store, and when your daughter looks at you across a checkered tablecloth at the Italian place she's loved since high school, and she finally starts to talk, you wait, and you listen, and then you tell her you'll handle it. And then you do. I've been thinking lately about how the worst things that happen to the people we love don't usually arrive all at once. They don't show up at the door with a name. They come in through the side, through small adjustments, through reasonable-sounding requests, through 100 tiny moments where someone chooses to say nothing because they've already learned that saying something costs too much. That's what happened to my daughter. Not a single catastrophic event. Just 5 years of the ceiling getting a little lower every few months, so gradually she stopped noticing she was hunching. What I keep coming back to is this. The actions Nathan and his mother took had consequences that went far beyond what they probably imagined. They didn't just take the car. They didn't just consolidate the bank account. Every time Nathan redirected money toward his mother's errands, every time Diane made a comment and Nathan backed her up instead of his wife, every time Claire was made to feel that her judgment was unreliable, those weren't isolated moments. They were compounding, like interest on a debt Claire never agreed to carry. And eventually, all of it came due. Not because someone punished them, but because that's simply how it works. What you build on dishonesty doesn't hold. What you maintain through control doesn't last. You can manage a person for a while. You cannot manage them forever. The intelligence part of this, and I mean that word plainly, not as a compliment to myself, was simply paying attention. I didn't walk into that Kroger with a plan. I walked in to buy coffee and a bag of rice. But I saw my daughter counting bills for a pack of diapers, and I didn't look away. I didn't tell myself it was probably fine. I'd spent 30 years in a business that punishes people who ignore small warning signs, and I just applied the same instinct to something that mattered 100 times more. I think a lot of people see something that worries them, and they talk themselves out of it. They say it's not their place. They say the other person would have asked for help if they needed it. What I've learned, and Claire is living proof of this, is that sometimes people don't ask because they've been made to feel that asking is weakness, or because they're not sure what they're experiencing is real, or because they've adjusted so completely to a smaller life that they've forgotten the original size of it. The bravest thing Claire did wasn't hiring the attorney. It wasn't moving into that apartment. It was sitting across from me at that Italian restaurant and starting to talk when everything in her had been trained to stay quiet. That took more courage than most people will ever understand, and it came from somewhere inside her that 5 years of careful erosion hadn't managed to reach, that place in a person that knows, even when they've stopped listening to it. She found her way back to that place, and she did it one honest conversation at a time. I'm 61 years old, and I don't have any grand wisdom to offer. What I have is this: the life you build on honesty, even when it's painful, even when it means starting over in a 2-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and a 3-year-old who likes dinosaur sheets, that life is yours. It holds, it grows, it gives you mornings where you wake up and the first feeling isn't dread. Claire has those mornings now. I know because she told me. That's everything.